Booker. I apologize for the delay in these readings. My throat is sort of better, so hopefully we can get through this today without too much trouble. In other words, I got my hot tea here, so that should help. We're going to continue on with Soleman the Heeled Avenger. We're on the next chapter of The Shoe on the Other Foot. Big Toe had no problem extricating Wedge and the rest of his crew from the hands of the police. As for his add-ons of Pussyfoot and Lightfoot, they could cool their heels for a while. His own men were perfectly capable of raising the pallet again. He had only used them to tie up the pallet. By leaving them in the clink, he saved himself $5,000. He considered that they might get bail, but what of it? He had gone through an intermediary, and there was no way they could find him. He leaned back in his chair with his hands clasped behind his head. Life was good. Wedge came to receive orders. Let's try again. Go get the pallet before the roof repairs begins. You still have the fake valleys on the pallet ready, right? Sure, boss, but you might want to hear me out first. Yeah, the cops nailed us, but how'd they know we were pulling the job there? Lightfoot says that he was captured by an old foe, guy who calls himself Soleman. Soleman? You mean like in the song? No, boss, soul, like in shoe soul. He said that this guy and his partner are not to be underestimated. The big toe looked thoughtful. Soleman, so we've got a vigilante on our hands. Wedge shook his head. Not exactly. Seems this guy works hand in hand with the police. They even have a direct line to his hideout. I figure the guy he works with, this Flats, might be or used to be a policeman. That kind of legitimizes what Soleman does. And the chief in the chief of police's office, Soleman and Flats were being sworn in as deputies. This allowed them to investigate crimes and make arrests. In other words, they were now an official part of the police force. The chief had been informed by Officer Podolsky that Soleman had been assisting him to become a better officer. He had been called in on several cases that Soleman had been working on and had been credited instead of the one who really deserved it. Now that things were regularized, the chief felt more comfortable calling Soleman in. He also felt that this should stop the commissioner's comments about calling in their assistants. The commissioner was not happy with the fact that Soleman and Flats had been deputized. When it was pointed out that since he had requested that they be sent out on a case, it was felt that their position should be regularized. After all, if the commissioner himself recognized the benefit of using them, then they must be of a high caliber. He realized that he had been caught flat-footed. He spent the next hour pounding on his desk and cursing. Last thing he needed was a law enforcement agent outside of his control. The big toe was also concerned. This name of Soleman had been bandied about recently in the underworld. This person had a whole armory of unusual weapons at his disposal. They claimed his car had been altered with weapons as well. It had a dispenser for shoe tacks to puncture tires, foot spray, fog to incapacitate, even a pointed-toed shoe launcher. His ability to reason was beyond that of the smartest police officer, and he was tenacious in tracking down those he had his foot on. He realized that it was this Soleman more than the police who had trapped his people. Something would have to be done about it. With limited time, though, he just hoped his team of four would be a match for Soleman and his partner. Time was running out. If Big Toe wanted those bally shoes, he would have to act quickly before the work on the roof began. He had 2 days at most to swap the pallet. He visited the store, and not only was the pallet still there, but it was still tied with rope, making the haul easier. He bought out the drawing of the roof and surrounding area and began to station his people. His largest concern was timing. The police had arrived on the scene quickly, so either they had been on call or were nearby. That meant that any gunplay would have to be at the last moment. Well, logistics worked out. He called in Wedge to give him the plan. Perry was relaxing at home after a strenuous stay in the park exercising. Using the Eurotrack gave him a good workout with the added benefit of being in the fresh air. Flats was taking the morning in the shoebox and would be sure to inform him if anything of interest came in. His phone rang and he leisurely picked it up. Flats was on the other end and sounded both curious and concerned. Perry's first indication of what type of problem he was coming depended on how he was addressed. If Flats said Perry, it was something trivial. If Soleman, he was being called into action. Soleman, I just got a call from the prison. Lightfoot wants to speak to you. Perry considered the request. It'd be just as well to go along. You never knew with crooks. It might be something interesting, because Lightfoot and Pussyfoot were not ordinary crooks. In the darkened prison conference room, Lightfoot was seated at the far end of the table. He had kept up with his habitual gentlemanly grooming, but otherwise looked like any other inmate. Depressed and forlorn, he had none of his previous verve. He sat slumped in his chair, a beaten man. Soleman almost felt sympathy for him. Lightfoot cleared his throat, leaned forward, and earnestly spilled his guts. Soleman, you're the kind of person who puts their best foot forward, a man with 2 feet on the ground. In short, we think we can put faith in you. Soleman was instantly curious. We? Yes, my sister and I are both in accord on this request. You see, Big Toe recently bailed out his regular minions, but has left us here cooling our heels. In short, he has given us the boot. We feel we can trust you because even in the middle of arresting us at Cobbler's Corner, you made sure Pussyfoot didn't hurt herself when the rope slipped. Now, that told us more than you know. Soleman was beginning to warm to these two despite himself. How can I be of service to you? Lightfoot smiled at the way Soleman had phrased it. Well, we want to be of service to you. We know that Big Toe is going to try again, as well as you do. We also know that since we were not bailed out by him, the pallet remains tied, the work I performed with Pussyfoot's assistance. What you need this time to effect a capture is time. If you're willing to bail us out, we'll buy you that time. We offer to untie the pallet in such a way that it will still appear to be tied. This will give you the time to have the police arrive. They can't move until tomorrow because the police vehicle in Palmont is open, or is manned till then. That gives us only the night. Afterwards, we can either return to jail, or, here he looked hopefully at Soleman, or we can return to our former trade in the circus. Crime really doesn't pay, and prison is not something we can tolerate well. Soleman looked into the heart and mind of the man opposite. They had taken their first steps into crime and stubbed their toes. He made his decision. I'll be waiting for you outside. Lightfoot was in tears of gratitude. He really wasn't cut out for the criminal lifestyle. Soleman paid their bail. Fortunately, it was not a burdensome amount, since they were both, as far as the law was concerned, first offenders. Lightfoot met him first, then they had to go next door to bail out Pussyfoot. Her immediate response to being set free was a grateful hug to Lightfoot and a passionate kiss bestowed on Soleman. Seated in a nearby diner, they went over their plans for that night. It was fortunate that the crane on the roof was a tandem rig. Pussyfoot and Soleman would operate the controls, while Lightfoot and Flats worked the ropes. Flats was more than a little concerned as to his part in this escapade. He didn't mind dangling from a strand of wire, but he was concerned with his ability to soar and maneuver as Lightfoot would be doing. Soleman, I'm going to be tripping over my own feet. In order to relieve Flats' concerns, they rigged up a drop from the ceiling. While it wouldn't be controllable, it was usable for training. He pushed Flats so he would swing freely. Flats worked to control his flight, position, and balance. Within an hour, he had mastered control and could maneuver however he wanted to. He was confident he could do what he needed to do without making a fool of himself. As dusk fell, the two teams met on the roof of Best Foot Forward. They went over the plans once more, and Flats and Lightfoot got into their harnesses. All were wearing black, and in the shadows of the building opposite, they were practically invisible. A sudden shaft of moonlight illuminated Pussyfoot. Her lithe figure was shown to advantage in the tight-fitting garment she wore. Soleman felt stirrings down to the soles of his shoes that showed in his eyes. Pussyfoot blushed in acknowledgement of similar feelings, but there was work to do. Both mastered their inner turmoil, gained control, and slid into the seats on the crane. Pulling the slack, they gently hauled the two men off the ground and over the gaping hole in the roof. Working in tandem, the crane operators lowered the men, swinging them slightly so that they could work from top to side, unwinding the taut rope. For half an hour, they rewove the rope around the loaded pallet. The center of the rope was a loop that showed top and center. The rest of the rope was woven and layered around, the bottom tucked in under the pallet. As they rose, their task completed, Lightfoot and Flats lay prone, their feet touching, and air walked up. It amused them, and when they passed the edge of the roof, it amused Soleman and Pussyfoot as well. They agreed to meet the following night to watch the proceedings and assist, if needed, to stick their foot in and trip up the proceedings. Once more, Soleman and Flats were accompanied by Pussyfoot and Lightfoot. Again, they looked out from the top of the air conditioner. Flats was being disturbed by a soft scuffling sound nearby. Looking over, he saw that Soleman and Pussyfoot were having a game of footsies. Shaking his head, he looked forward and sighed. The sound of a forklift was heard from the side of the store. On the pallet, two men were being raised. As they reached roof height, they leapt off the parapet and rushed towards the crane. The first to reach it sat at the controls. The other grudgingly put on the harness, laying nearby, and hooked himself in. The man at the controls familiarizing himself with the dials and levers. Pulling one lever to let the line out, the next swung the crane, dragging the man in harness towards the opening and dropping him over the edge. Plummeting, the operator quickly raised the line, causing the man to cry out in pain as he was quickly jerked upwards. As he rose above the gaping hole, the operator grinned. "I think I'm getting the hang of this now." He slowly lowered the other man down. "Oh, goody," he muttered as he descended. Arriving at the pallet, he hooked the other line onto the rope. Pussyfoot was quietly giggling. Knowing how much finesse was required to control both panels, she was beside herself with joy as she anticipated the next maneuver. The man at the controls, with too much confidence, pushed the lever for maximum speed to raise the pallet. Unfortunately, he pulled up his man instead of the pallet, and he came soaring up, hitting his head on the extension beam. He slowly moved to the side, and being impatient and fed up, was pushing the release on the harness. The man plummeted the few remaining feet to the rooftop. Storming over to the control panel, he pushed the other man out of the cab and brought the pallet up. Or rather, he thought he was bringing up the pallet. What he saw arriving was just the rope. He cursed softly. In order to increase the speed the pallet would raise, he had also risen the extension beam. Without the weight of the pallet, the beam pitched over backwards and the cab lay on the roof. The man inside crawled dizzily out. Wedge in the truck couldn't understand what was taking so long. Pussyfoot and Lightfoot had done the job in moments, and these guys were taking half an hour. He honked hard on the horn, hoping to hurry them up. Seeing them peering over the edge, he figured they had finally gotten the pallet up. He waved for them to lower it while he got out and began lowering the pallet forks. Seeing the forks lowering, the men leapt off the roof, landing on the forks. The sudden weight caused the lift to lean. The men scrambled to find a hold as the lift truck canted until it slowly toppled over onto the cab of the truck, crashing the windshield. The sound of the frightened men inside the cab and crashing glass woke the block, and calls were placed to the police. Arriving from both sides, the criminals were quickly apprehended, and the truck and Falk's shoes were impounded once more. It would take Big Toe a while to recoup his losses after this caper. The shoes he'd paid a lot of money for were not only crushed, but impounded along with the truck. His people were once more incarcerated with a much higher bail than before. Now he would have to take on a new crew, instruct them, pay them, and find new work for them. Having a great many criminals at his disposal, he considered he would choose the next crime with plan it, and then pick those criminals that to his knowledge would have the capabilities of carrying out the crime. On the drive to take Lightfoot and Pussyfoot to their apartment, it was decided that a pleasant meal would be a fitting end to the night. Pussyfoot suggested a restaurant near where they were living, and it was agreed to meet there in an hour. Driving swiftly home, Perry and Oedipus cleaned up and changed. Oedipus placed a call and discussed with the person on the other end to meet them at the restaurant. Hanging up the phone, he seemed pleased with the response. Looking more like their dapper and sophisticated selves in flawless tuxedos, they arrived at the restaurant eager for the repast and, more importantly, the company. Lightfoot and Pussyfoot arrived. Excuse me. Lightfoot and Pussyfoot arrived soon after. Lightfoot was a handsome man with a clear, high cheekbone face, a dignified demeanor, and was fastidiously dressed in a tuxedo of his own design. Pussyfoot caused a stir amongst the diners as she swept gracefully in. Her long, patterned silk dress flowed behind her like a rippling stream as she moved. The simple string of pearls shone brightly against the deep black of her dress. Perry graciously pulled out her chair and then sat to her right. Oedipus had his eyes trained on the door. When a very attractive lady arrived, he rose and escorted her to the table. He introduced her as Sharon and assisted her to her seat. The meal was chosen with the care of people accustomed to the finer dining establishments. The talk was witty and the company warm. Over dinner, they talked easily on a variety of interesting subjects: literature, music, travel. But all too quickly, the meal was ending and the party would break up. Oedipus and Sharon excused themselves as they had other engagements. Lightfoot also excused himself as he had a train to catch to rejoin the circus. He bowed courteously and once more thanked Perry for providing their bail and assuring him that he would show for the trial. Left to themselves, Perry and Pussyfoot lingered over dessert and coffee. As they looked into each other's eyes, words became unnecessary. She took his hand and tilted her head. A warm smile lit her face. Perry, I don't see why you feel the need for using the persona of Soleman. You don't need an alter ego, says the woman who calling herself Pussyfoot. Perry reminded her of the general smile. Well, that was what we used when we were criminals. My real name's Persephone. I don't want to use Pussyfoot anymore. Perry thought it over. Did he really want or need an alter ego? Granted, it was amusing and allowed him to use some fun gadget. It also got him the attention he craved. He never would have gotten the opportunity to use his talents without his alter ego. He had to admit, though, that the most enjoyment was in dressing up as Soleman and living the dreams of his youth. He had listened to the Shadow and had worn his father's hat, a beach towel, and a scarf to imitate him. He never really took himself seriously. However, now he took his self-appointed task as a preserver of the law very seriously. So did his compatriot. Oedipus was similar to himself in that he took a great deal of enjoyment in becoming Flats, but as a sworn deputy and a trained officer, he took his duties earnestly. Explaining this to Persephone, he was pleased that she didn't feel he was being ridiculous. The fact that he had traced her and her brother and foiled the machinations of the big toe, had proven his and Flat's worth as crime fighters. She reached over and unclasped her bag. From within, she pulled 2 masks that they had worn while committing crimes. Well, if you're going to continue, then you better wear a mask to hide your identities. That way you will protect yourselves and those you care about. She leaned over and kissed him lingeringly. I hope that I am one of the latter. She rose, intimating she had to leave. Pocketing the mask, Perry rose, paid the bills, and escorted her home. He was rewarded with another warm kiss at the door before she disappeared up the stairs to her apartment. Perry walked away thoughtfully. Looking up, he saw her leaning out on the windowsill, watching him depart. As he passed her window, a rose dropped, landing in his outstretched hand. When he looked back up, she was gone, and the light went out. He went home with the rose attached through the buttonhole of his coat. All right, that's it for today. Equipping for battle is our next chapter. So now that I'm back in shape, hopefully, we can start this again. We'll be a little more regular on the readings. So I hope you're enjoying these. If you are, leave a message. If not, leave a message and let me know why. So take it easy. I look forward to seeing you again on our next reading. Be good to yourself.